Mute everyone.
And could everyone mute the microphones, please? Right, Evan, it's over to you.
Okay, now how do I get put the screen on?
Oh God, go to the top and share. Click on share.
Share, that's right, isn't it? Share web browser.
What are you sharing? Your screen. Pull it up on your screen and share your screen.
Share content. Share web browser. Yep. Share content.
Yeah, share content.
Okay.
And then we can see what you're watching on your screen now.
Nothing exciting, unfortunately. Right, can you see that presentation? Is
no.
This always happens here. Yeah, share content, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But we won't share screen, isn't it?
Share screen. Click on share screen. Once it comes up with share content.
Share content, yeah.
Unless you got stop video pressed.
Right, now content, you need to click on now screen 1.
Ah. Is that better?
That's it. That's better.
Okay, is that the full thing?
That's the full thing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be all right when you got your full license. You're all right.
I don't think I'll pass it again, to be honest. That's probably the truth. Right. Okay, you want me to go?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay.
At your own speed and your own time.
All right. Yep. As the title says, this is a talk on the my experience with the IC 7300 Icom's SDR radio. Okay, so what is it, first of all? Basically, it's a single receiver 100-watt base station, which covers all the HF bands, all the way from top band through to 10 meters, including 60 meters, as well as 6 meters, and in Europe, 4 meters. We've got that allocation. And if you just want to receive, it's continuous from 30 kilohertz through to 74.8 megahertz. Essentially, I mean, it's not a top of the line rig. It's pretty much what you'd probably call the lower end of the base station rigs, which I'd sort of class as between 1,000 and 1,500 retail. And you see some of the other ones in that sort of range. I just plucked these off the Wallace and Gromit website, or Wooters and Stanton, I should say. So, yeah, about 3 ASUs there. I think the FTDX 3000, one of them, which I think's a load of rubbish, to be honest. Sorry, Tony. No, only joking. And also the FTDX, quite a new one, the FTDX 10, a little above 1,500 at the moment. The FT991, which includes UHF and VHF as well as Fusion, so it's a bit of extra. And also the Kenwood TS480 SAT, which I think is still in production, certainly still on sale. The IC 7300 at the moment retails at about 1,200, give or take. But can't see that lasting. It's probably going to go up. They always do. I mean, the idea behind the, you'd think, look at the ASU dominating this sort of class of rigs, you think that the 7300 was designed to compete with them, and it probably is in some sort of ways, but really what Icom wanted to do was to introduce the sort of loyal Icom customer to the idea of SDRs, and hopefully later buy a higher end rig like the IC 7610 or something like that, which is a twin receiver SDR, much fancier than the 7300, but a lot dearer and a lot more margin, I think, for Icom. And where I got that from was what Ray Novak said in an interview a few years ago. Ray Novak being the Icom sales rep in the States, and he can be quite candid sometimes. Okay. So looking at what an SDR is, and as I was saying, this is the company's first foray into software-defined radio. Back in, and that was introduced back in about 5 years ago now. Seems like yesterday. And with an SDR, what happens is a computer or some sort of information technology undertakes the modulation and demodulation function of a radio, and that could be either using a standalone computer like a PC or a Mac to do the key processing functions, or it could be a standalone. Well, the IT itself is in the rig itself, and this is the case with the IC 7300. So it can be used without a computer. Certainly the early SDRs, you'd have to plug it into a computer. So you could just call it an SDR with knobs. It's also called what's called a direct sampling. I'm looking at the receive side this at the moment. A direct sampling SDR, which means that the as you see in that those little diagrams, looking at the one right at the bottom, the incoming signals come through the antenna and maybe going through a filter or some a pre-selector or something will get digitized by an analog to digital converter, and then is subject to digital signal processing. And looking at the diagrams on the right, these are the charts for the block diagrams for the receiver at the top for the 7300 and the transmitter at the bottom. I don't know how well you can see those. It's a bit small. But first of all, looking at the transmit side, so looking at the bottom right diagram, you get the microphone audio coming through, probably a little bit of an amplifier, and then it goes into the A/D conversion, and then the digital signal processing, and then et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Evan, can I just break in mate, there, please?
Mm.
On the left-hand side of your screen, you should have an elongated bar, and in it there's a plus and minus sign for you to zoom in or zoom out of the picture, so you get a better picture if you wish. That, and you can do it individually.
Right. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to really dwell on this, to be honest. Sorry, where is that? Did you say?
On the left-hand side of the viewing screen, there's an elongated box there, and it says fit to viewer, zoom out, zoom in, ask to control, and also annotate. So if you use the two zooms, the zoom in and zoom out.
This is on the WebEx itself, is it?
This is on the WebEx screen. What people are looking at now, not you, but what the viewers are looking at.
Oh, I see. Right.
You have to mouse over it before it happens.
Yeah, put your mouse over it and click on it, and it'll zoom out for you, or zoom in.
I don't know where it is. Sorry.
No, you don't have it.
Oh, I don't have it at all. Right.
No,
okay.
you don't have it. You're the presenter. Buzz off.
Because there is a thing on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Which has a magnifying glass. I'm not.
That's right. There is on yours. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we have it as we have it as users. You don't need to worry about it because individuals can zoom in and out to see the pictures if they want.
Tony.
Right.
Yes, Slovak.
Sorry for cutting in. If I can speak to Evan for a second. In a presentation, in a PowerPoint, if you come out from the presenter view, you will have the full screen on the
share view.
Yes.
Right.
At the moment, you're running presenter view. So that will solve the zoom problem.
Right. Okay. So you're not seeing my presentation as the whole screen?
No, it's only a presenter view, which is like a dual screen.
Right. Okay. So how do I do that?
One of these icons in the I think in display settings right at the top.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just click there. Yeah, swap presenter view and the slideshow.
Oh right. Okay. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry, I thought you were getting, because on my left screen, I've got two screens. On the left screen, I'm certainly seeing.
It's okay. Happy bunny now. It's
right.
working.
Okay. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. You still can't see the diagram. Still too blooming small, to be honest. But yeah. So yeah, going back to transmit. So your microphone audio is digitized pretty much immediately, and then amplified, etc. The thing is, what you notice if you go back to the left-hand diagrams, you see the top two examples. They tend to be what happened with earlier SDRs. The analog to digital conversion would occur sort of much later in the process, and you'd have the sort of super heterodyne type situation at the start, and then only later where you do the analog to digital conversion and then your DSP. So that would be, I guess, one of the middle one might be probably what's in the K3, the Yellowcraft one, which is a hybrid SDR. I must admit, I'm not really an expert on that side of it, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, in our case, the 7300 is the third option, is direct sampling. So it's incoming signal, analog to digital conversion, then your DSP. And I mean, the idea is, I mean, if the conversion happens, right at the front end, it's better if you can do it. But the problem is you're going to get a wide bandwidth of signals, which, if you're going to have a decent sampling rate, is going to be pretty hard to do. So in the early days, 10 or so years ago, it was that this was pretty rare. And you'd notice that most of the SDRs that were on the market were really in the sort of the lower HF part of the band, where the bandwidth wasn't very much. Whereas if you're going sort of VHF or UHF, it's much, much harder. Certainly if you're looking at entire bands, because they're really massive when you think of it, much, much bigger than at HF. The other thing with SDR, and just to cut a long story short on this, if you have a look on the top right block diagram, you'll notice in the middle there's this sort of you see the two mixers. One goes off on a 90 degree out of phase. This is the so-called I and Q. And when you've got the two, one set of signals in phase and one 90 degrees out of phase, what that can do is actually allow you to give you a broad spectrum scope. So you can look at entire bands, like you get with pan adapters, which is what the 7300 has. So that's probably the biggest plus of SDR. Not only does it tend to be more selective and sensitive. I mean, you can get razor sharp filters, for instance, but you can also get these basically like how a prism splits up light into its component wavelengths. This does the same with radio waves. Okay, so why did I consider the 7300? Well, a couple of years ago, I was looking to get something better, and if possible, a base station rig to replace my little IC 70,000. Sorry, 7,000 as my main rig. Not knocking the 7,000, but it's a bit limiting. And I was going to put the 7000, which I haven't yet, of course, it'll take too long. Make it as part of a a mobile or a Go kit, and use it as my portable rig. So I wasn't really looking for a top of the line transceiver, like an FTDX 5000 or something like that, which is really good, but I just wouldn't use it even if I could afford it. I'm not a serious DXer, to be honest. I'm not. I do contests from home, but not very, very seriously. So this is where a really really good receiver comes into its own. But I'm not really that serious. And what I found, I mean, the reviews of the 7300 pretty much favourable across the board. The good functionality, the things that rigs are really known for good ones are sort of things like close-in signal performance. So if you get a really strong signal right next to you, does that create extra noise or blot out the signal that you want to hear? And the 7300 performs okay in that, but you could actually do better. And the other thing that's a bit of a bandwagon effect here, because it was popular, it meant that lots of column inches were written about it, lots of commentary, advice, articles, videos on YouTube, etc. And you get more of this for the 7300 than you would probably say for the FTDX 3000, for instance. So that was part of the appeal. And of course, if something goes wrong, if you've got a rig that no one really uses that much, it's you go and type into the internet or whatever, into Google, chances are you're not going to find what you need. But with the 7300, you're almost certainly going to find someone who's had the same issue you've had or whatever. And there's lots of accessories made for it as well. Okay, so looking at the actual rig itself from the outside, you notice that it's not a big radio, not big radio at all. When you look at pictures, you think, oh, that's probably quite big, but it's not. It's less than a foot across and a foot deep, and weighs only about 4 kilos, which is quite light for a base station rig. And the thing is as well, I mean, you think, well, for such a small area, you wouldn't be able to fit much on, but it does. It puts the knobs and buttons, it puts enough of them on, and uses what little area it has to good use. So the thing is, well, I mean, you can't avoid this with a radio like this. You're going to get lots of functions and settings in menus. It's just the way it is. But if you have to go into menus and make sort of quick adjustments, you can do it. And also the functions that you'll really need to make a quick adjustment to are actually on the front for you to use. So they've thought this through quite well, I think. So, for example, you've got your clarifier, see the little red ring on it. So clarifier, that will be sort of just you adjust your receiving frequency a bit if someone drifts off, or you want to sort of make the SSB signal a bit higher pitch or something. You can do that. The split frequency, if you want someone's transmitting and receiving on separate frequencies, you can allow for that. Just click the split on. That's very easy. You can switch between the two VFOs, A and B, just with the press of a button. And you can go into between the VFO, which is just spinning the dial, and you can go into memories just with a click of that button. It's got a built-in tuner. You can see that on the left, the button for that. I'll talk a bit more about the tuner later on. But there it is, easy to find, easy to press. The well, depending what mode you're using for voice, this is a button to switch you between voice activated transmission and your PTT, and for CW it's between your semi and full break-in, or if you just want to transmit this, just want to hear the side tone, you press that button as well. The XFC, which is quite a useful function, certainly if you're operating in a split frequency pile up, because you'll be listening to the station transmitting on the receive frequency, but you may want to hear what's going on the frequency that you're going to be transmitting on, which may be a couple of kilohertz up or something, and you can press that button and that will let you hear what's going on your transmit frequency. Going back to the left, this is if you want to put in the preamp or the attenuator. And you've also got the twin passband tuning and the volume control, which is the AF and the RF gain, and also squelch if you go on the other side. Squelch you mainly use for the FM, sort of 6 meter FM and stuff. But you notice a nice big knobs, easy to use, not fidgety like on the IC73. Sorry, the IC7000. Nice and big, nice and just lean over and grab them. And you also got a nice, large, heavy VFO, which is really good. They could have easily put a cheap sort of knob on the front, but they didn't. It's a nice, proper, heavy, really good feel to it on the VFO when you're spinning it around. That sounds a bit sort of superficial, but these things that make a radio is a pleasure to use or otherwise. And you've got on the panel on the screen, you've got your mode and filter settings on display, and you can click between the 3 filters if you like, 3 preset filters. And you've got the auto tune if you're on CW and you're nearby the signal but not sure if you're right on top of it. You can just press the auto tune and it will tune that in for you. And looking at changing bands and modes, you can see at the front panel there's no sort of buttons for different bands, as you would find in a sort of bigger radio. But it's still easy enough to change bands and also modes. So if you look on the right there, so for example, if you're on 14 megs and you want to go down to go up to 21, for instance, just click on where the digits are. The 14 is in this case, and then you can select your band. It's just like having the keypad there, but it just disappears when you don't need it. Similarly, if you want to change your mode, you just press the button which is showing the mode, the bit on the screen that's showing the mode, so USB in this case, and you can change it to say CW or whatever. Easy peasy. Something that I would like, if I had a choice, would be a CW jack at the front, and as I was saying, there's not much real estate there, so they've got to use the space quite efficiently. But I think they could probably get rid of, say, the notch filter and this is just between the 2 knobs on the left there. The notch filter, the noise blanker, and the noise reduction. Not that I think they're unimportant. I think notch filters probably aren't used that much these days. It used to be in the days of FM. Oh, sorry, of lots of AM. We'd have these big giant carrier waves everywhere, and they just produce these heterodynes. If you were sort of tuned a bit off frequency, or if someone else was sort of had tuned up nearby, you could get rid of it, but you don't really need it these days. I mean, you could easily put that in one of the menus, I think. And similarly, the noise blanker and noise reduction, although you probably want them on, are you going to, I just leave them on. I mean, I don't think both of them just may as well just leave them switched on. So they just take up space, which they don't need to, I think, in my humble opinion. Okay, looking at the back, very much an uncluttered, and I'll get that up, sorry. There we go. So looking at the back, not much going on there. It's sort of what you expect, probably a shack-in-the-box rig like an FT857 or my 7000. I think it's probably got less stuff than my 7000 actually. But you know, that's good. That's easy to set up. Don't have to consult the manual every time that you plug things in. So what you've got sockets for power, the top left, your antenna, the bottom left, external amplifier, which is in the top middle there. Sorry, that's the tuner, isn't it? Sorry. The ACL jack and the send jack, I think, for the linear amplifier. For your digital and cat controller at the bottom, there's accessory socket, and I'm not sure if it's showing the CIV remote control jack. That's if you want separate cat control. And also there's a USB port, which I'll talk a bit about in a minute, so you can plug the rig directly into the PC without an interface. And there's also a CW jack and the external speaker port as well. So yeah, you could be a lot busier if it wanted to be. Yeah, one of the disappointments I think is, well, the main disappointment for me anyway, is the lack of a second antenna socket, and there's not even one for a receive antenna. I think for a rig of this, well, for any sort of base station rig these days, you'd probably expect a second socket, and I think people might be surprised that they don't get one with this. Thing is, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I'd certainly like one, but you can get, I mean, this is the sort of thing I've got. It's just a little box, and you plug your your antenna when you want to use for transmit, the antenna when you use for receive, and then plug that into the rig with a patch lead, and a little relay will sort of detect if you're transmitting RF, and flick the little circuit over to the transmit antenna and flick it back when you release the PTT. And MFJ make one of them. Just takes 12-volt supply. Nothing fancy. In fact, you can make one, to be honest. It's easy enough. But it would be nice to have the second socket in there in the rig itself. Okay. Yeah, as I was saying, for the USB port, which is, I think, is something really good. And funnily enough, for a lower priced rig to have that sort of feature is quite recent, even though USB ports have been around for 25 years or something. Things can be a bit slow to change in amateur radio, particularly from the big three Japanese manufacturers. But you can have a direct link to your PC, certainly, and that's good if you want to use any of the digi modes, and also control your rig from the PC, the cat control, or what Icom calls CIV. So there's no need for an external interface, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll go into that in a bit more detail because I think that's a real plus. The one thing as well that you won't notice, that you will notice, and it isn't there, is an Ethernet port. So if you want to go to the internet, connect your radio to the internet for, say, remote operation or whatever, you have to go through a PC or a Raspberry Pi or something. Whereas the IC7610, for instance, will have an Ethernet cable, and even the IC705, which is the portable version, really, of the the 7300 will have a Wi-Fi thing which can go directly to you into the internet, but not in the 7300's case, unfortunately. Okay, so despite being menu driven, it's still quite easy to change settings, and it does, I think, pass what's called the no manual test, and you'll be able to find the menus that you need and make the necessary adjustments even without consulting the manual, I think, in probably 90% of the cases. And for instance, when I started and I wanted to sort of change between using a straight key and a paddle, that was easy enough to find. And in fact, I'll go through this is an example of that here. So all you have to do, and this could be the case with any sort of mode. It's a similar sort of pattern that you get. Just click the menu on the bottom. These are hard keys below the panel there. This shows on the panel. Select the keyer. What's the key there? Just click another button. One more button. It says edit or set, which is easy to follow. CW key set, and then key type, and you select you'll scroll down that screen, the CW key set, and that's it. And I mean, it's not instant, but I mean, you're going to find it without much trouble. And looking at the manual itself, it is actually very good. Lots of screenshots, easy to follow, flow diagrams, etc. Not just lots of words. So that is really helpful. Certainly, I think if you're fairly new to radio, or if you're using this as potentially as a club station. Hint, hint. Looking at digimodes, I think this is one of the big pluses for, say, if you're thinking of buying a shack-in-the-box rig like, say, an IC 7000 or an IC 7100 or something, for example. Even though they're a bit cheaper, you're still going to have to buy an external digital interface, and that can be a bit of a, well, I mean, depends how far you want to go with it, but it's just another hassle. What they've effectively got a digital interface built into the radio itself. There we go. And the rig also contains, and that interface effectively contains its own sound card. And I mean, you don't have to have that, but it does free up the PC sound card for other uses. And you don't have to go into the PC to change the audio levels, etc. Although you can do that as well. The USB connection is high speed. There's not going to be any latency. It just goes straight through, which is really good. What I think this is the biggest plus of it is the type of COM port that you get, the virtual COM port. COM port, serial port, in other words. This is where you may have one day plugged a printer or a modem or something into if you had an old PC. But these days they have COM port emulators built in to the software. So, but what comes up is not the normal COM port that you'd find. It's what's called a USB to UART bridge, and don't ask me really what that means. I don't have much of an idea. But what that allows you to do is that just to use the one virtual COM port to perform all your functions. So that could be rig control, keying CW, throwing the PTT, doing the digimodes, and you know, whether that be the direct radio teletype or audio tone modes like FT8 or PSK. All of it goes through that one COM port. And you see, I'll give an example here. So this is N1MM Logger, which is, you know, popular contest software, contest expedition software. You'll notice that you've just got the one COM port here. This is what I've got set up called COM port 13. It's just what I've named it. It's not 13 COM ports or anything, it's just the one. There's the name of the radio, CW other, and set, and that's it. However, if I want to use a digital interface, which is an all singing, all dancing one, does CW, does digital modes, does FSK, RTTY, etc. You have to have 3 separate COM ports, and you've got to find the one you can't be sure immediately which one does the cat and all this sort of stuff. And you've got to find that out, and it's just a pain. So if you unplug it and put it into a different, unplug your USB cable and put it into another USB port, you've got to reset it. Oh, it's just a pain. And not only that, you just have the one lead going from the PC to the rig. Whereas you look at the this is the one we've got at the club, the Digimaster Pro 3, which is fine, but you look at the number of leads going in and out. One lead for data, one lead for CAT, one lead for CW, and then there's a USB port on cord on top of that. It's just a lot of hassle and a lot of metal that RF can piggyback into your rig on. The thing is, I mean, as well, if you did want to use an external interface like that one, you still could with the 7300. I mean, you've got the ACC port in the back there, a 13 pin port, quite a common size, and you could still use something like that if you wanted. I mean, the advantage of using something like that is you have sort of manual control of your transmit and audio levels. That's handy instead of going into menus either on the radio or the PC. And you know, this little knob on the left allows you to adjust CW speed. So that's good. That's good, nice and handy to have right in front of you. But I imagine most people would settle for what the 7300 has on offer by itself. Yeah, I mentioned that before, didn't I? Okay. So looking at the menus, as I said, you can't really avoid them with this rig. It just doesn't have enough area at the front to have knobs everywhere. But the menus are sort of easy and intuitive. So the thing is, what you find with the functions that you are likely to want to change, perhaps reasonably frequently, they show up on a side screen once you click this, what's called the multi button, which is on the top, just near the top right of the panel, the screen rather. And what you find, you see this little sort of thing at the side saying RF power, key speed, CW pitch. So that appears when you click the multi button in once. And these are things, I mean, certainly if you're a Morse operator, you probably would want to change. Certainly key speed, if you want to drop the speed, if someone replies to you sending slowly, you just click that in, highlight the key speed area, and you turn pale blue, and just turn the knob up or down the way you want. Similarly with CW pitch, I mean, most people have that, what they like forever and a day. But certainly, if it's, say, a club rig or a contest group rig, you know, people are very particular about these things and they want to change them. So, if you want to change it, it's easy enough to do. And similarly, if we're looking at sideband, and the things you want to change appear as well. Your microphone gain, your comp, which is speech compression, and your monitor level. That's the sort of the when you speak, what you can hear through your headphones when you're talking. So you can adjust that. So all the useful functions are there. And similarly, I mean, there's if you're doing digital, there's a separate mode of SSPs called SSP digital, and you'll find that those same things appear, except for the compression. It's one of the clever things that the rig does. I mean, if you go onto SSP digital, it knows that you want to do digital modes and it switches the compression off, which is quite useful, quite clever. Okay. So some of the things that are missing on the 7300, but you'd expect on other rigs. I mentioned before, certainly a modern fancy rig would have an Ethernet port, and I think just a normal one would have a second antenna socket. Pardon me. Hang on. Yeah, and the pricier rigs as well probably have a second receiver. That's why I did this sort of introduction to the 7300. It's a 100-watt single receiver rig, and of course you know one of the advantages of the IC 7610, for instance, the big brother of the 7300, is that second receiver. So you can listen to two bands at once. I don't know, I struggle to do that, but people do it. You know, the big shot contesters and DXs do it, definitely. The other thing that you'll notice is that the choice of settings levels may not be that wide on the 7300 and rigs of of this sort of price range. For instance, I mean, with attenuation, for instance, you press the attenuator button, you only get one level to choose from, which is 18 dB down, and similarly, I think with the preamp you get two levels as well. I'm not sure. I think they're how much they jump up by each time, but only two of those. Whereas I think, you know, if you've got say the FTDX 5000, which we use in the contest group, you've got various steps of attenuation. I think there's three. I think there's 6, 12, and 18 dB, and you could call it 4 if you had 0 dB. Switching that off. The other thing as well is the sharpness of the passband. With digital signal processing, this gives you a lot of flexibility on you can make it as sharp as possible, meaning that you can hear absolutely nothing either side of your passband that you've tuned in, or it can be quite soft in that you know you may detect signals outside of it, you can hear them, but hopefully they're not loud enough to make them too distracting. With say something like the FTDX 5000, you're going to have quite a bit of variance. You'll have a knob sort of to tune it smoothly between totally sharp and very soft, very flat. But with the 7300, there's just the sharp and the soft, unfortunately. Yeah, I said that, didn't I? The other thing, another example is with the 7300, you only really have for voice. You only really have bass and treble settings. You're not gonna have an equalizer, and you know, you can see the example here on the bottom right there of the. Look, I think for the vast majority of people that's okay. Again, I think if you want to do, if you're really super serious DXer or contest, you want to squeeze every bit of juice out of that lemon, out of that signal. Yeah, the things like the equalizers and the variable filters are what you want, but of course you're going to have to pay for them. Okay, Right, and here's one of the big features of the 7300, the touch panel and what it shows. Okay, so there's plenty of information on there if you want it. In fact, I think that's one of the big pluses of the Icom rigs. I think compared to my experience with the ACUs anyway, not knocking them, but the Icom rigs tend to use the screen space much more efficiently. They just use sort of, say, strips for like you've got in the middle there of that figure there for your signal strength. You know, not a big sort of analog meter replica, which I think looks nice, but I think just wastes a lot of space. What you'll notice, I mean, sorry, I'll take that off for a minute. I'll talk about the spectrum scope in a bit more detail soon. But I think that is the other big plus of the 7300 is the spectrum scope, and you at least want some of that showing, like you have on the screen there, just the little bottom slither of it, and that could be enough probably for most people. But there's a lot of other information that's on there as well. Split frequencies, etc., filter levels. Yeah, really quite good. What memory channel you're on, etc. Really, a lot of stuff squeezed in there, and it's easy to see. You think it's small, but it's not. It's quite a clear monitor. I think, yeah, you may not always want the spectrum scope, and this is another good thing about it is that you can just get rid of the spectrum scope and just have a series of meters showing. I think if you're doing, say, FT8, for instance, you're going to have the spectrum scope or the spectrum that you want to see coming through your PC anyway. So there's no real need to have it on the rig itself. But here you've got showing you looking at transmitting your power level, your ALC, and also your temperature level as well. And I think if you're certainly if an FT8 operator or something who's using a full duty cycle mode, you want those things showing the temperature, particularly because that can go up quite a bit. Probably not so much FT8, but I mean, don't know if you can remember JT65, but you'd be transmitting constantly full needle for 48 seconds. And if you do that repeatedly, it's with a 10-second break or something like that. If you do that constantly, that's just you'll notice the temperature go up. But the other good thing is there's a big fan at the back, so you shouldn't have any problem anyway with this rig. The ALC level, I think you want to see that as well, particularly for PSK type modes where you've got more than one tone, which could easily mix and create harmonics if you're in a nonlinear situation, which will be the case if your ALC goes up much above 0. So yeah, all that info is there for you to watch, to monitor. Just on the screen itself, I mean, I've seen stuff on the internet. People are asking sort of, oh, how long will it last and all this sort of stuff. The TFT screen. I guess we'll find out in years to come. You only just have to tap it in order to alert it. You don't have to really press it in or anything like that. And the other thing you can do, you can actually buy screen protectors, so that will stop it from being scratched. And the protector isn't sort of like sticky or anything. It just uses static to apply on. And the other thing as well, I mean, I've got one set which actually acts to cut the glare a bit, because the screen is a bit glary on its own. So it makes it clearer as well. So, but I bought a set for a set of 3 for £6 off Amazon. I think FX was the brand, but there are a few brands well worth getting. I think look into if you get a 7300. Yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Okay. And here's the big kahuna, the big thing that that you want the rig for, I think, and that's the band scope. Certainly for, and this is really what sets the IC 7300 from rigs sort of in the lower base station category, is that this band scope, it's clear, it's fast, it goes between narrow and wide range. And this is one of the pluses of SDR. Generally, this is the IQ thing I was talking about, which advantage of SDR is you can get scopes like this. The thing is about the scope, I mean, you can certainly live without it, but you'll only know what's going on within the passband you're actually listening to it at any point in time. And whereas the band scope will give you what pilots anyway call situational awareness. It gives you a sort of a broader understanding of what's going on in your surrounds. Whether you're sorry, as I said, the scope is fast moving as well. I should have added that. Band scope's been around for a number of years now, but this one is nice and clear, nice and fast, lots of resolution, which is not always the case. Yeah, just going back to the situational awareness. I mean, you can tell if a band is open or not. You can tell if you want to start sort of calling CQ if there's anyone who's going to be nearby. All these sorts of things, and it's one of these. It's a bit like the internet. Once you've got it, you never know how you ever cope without it. Right, and the scope itself, coming back to what it's like. You can even, the resolution can be good enough you can read the sort of the dots and dashes of CW if it's sort of slow enough. Stuff under the 20 words a minute you can pick out. A bit difficult, but you can pick it out. And the other thing as well, for a CW operator, you can see if people are sending CQ or test, which indicates that you could go to those stations, respond to those stations, whereas someone else might be in a conversation. Just one of the little sort of gimmicks that I like about it. It's quite malleable. You can adjust the span. You can go as narrow as 4 kilohertz, or really probably 5 kilohertz. That's where the ticks are. It ends at 4 kilohertz. 2 kilohertz either side at 0, and as wide as 800 of spectrum. 800 is a little bit too big, I think, but so you might want it narrow. That's how you can position in between stations if you want to call it, be in a place to call CQ during a busy contest, for instance, or see where you are in a pile up for a de-expedition is another example. I mean, you may want to go wide. That's if you want to see if a band is open, if there's any activity on it. You could just sort of click on it, say about 20 kilohertz worth, or sorry, probably about 40 kilohertz worth of bandwidth, and you'll know, if you choose it fairly well, like the bottom end of the CW or the SSB parts of the bands, you'll get a feeling whether it's active or not, and that is quite useful. Certainly in the marginal bands, like 10 meters at the moment, you could just click on that. If there's nothing there, well, then go back to 20 meters or whatever. Whereas I think the thing before, certainly on something like 10 meters, which is a huge band, stretches 3 megs basically. You can just sort of keep spinning and spinning the VFO, and you can just skip over something. You just passed over someone who just starts keying up or whatever. So the band scope's really useful for this sort of stuff. You can choose, I mean, as an example, you look at both the figures at the bottom. The one on the left shows the frequency. You can have that there, or you can have a 0 on the right. It's an example of that, a 0 and then kilohertz either side. I tend to have this thing on the right, and I tend to have it about 40 kilohertz of spectrum. A bit bigger, the resolution gets a bit funny, and too close where you miss stuff out either side of you. So, but you've got, the point is, you've got that choice. You can make the waterfall relative to the spectrum scope. The spectrum scope being the with the green line showing, the green bumpy line showing on the first, the one on the left there. That's a spectrum scope, sort of a classic spectrum scope, and the waterfall is the bit below, and you see that scrolling. But you can change the relative sizes of that. You can change the colors. You can make it so strong signals show in red, and the weaker signals sort of show in blue or green. Or similarly, you can have a monotone, sort of like what you see on the right there. Lots of choice for whatever you like. Okay, right. Just quickly, some of the other features of the 7300. I mentioned the inbuilt tuner. Showed you the button for that. Doesn't really tune a wide range. Between 1 to 3 and 3 to 1 SWR, which is not huge. I mean, I think for a G5RV, if you want to use it away from its main bands, it's going to be, you're going to need a lot bigger range than that. But I think for what you can do is sort of, if you say, particularly if you have an automated auto ATU, which doesn't always get you to 1-to-1, but if you press the little tuner button in, it sort of tops it up effectively and brings you to 1-to-1. So that's probably what's most useful. I think for something like maybe a long wire connected to a 9-to-1 Unknown or something like that, it is probably all right across the HF range. I haven't tried it, but it's worth. It's better than poking the eye with a sharp stick, isn't it? Another one of its features, a bit of a gimmick in a way, but I think some people might find it useful. Maybe those with very sharp, like sort of magnetic loop transmitting antennas, is a little SWR graph, and it gives you can just it produces a series of bars across. I'm not sure if the frequency has changed, but across each band, I think. So you see that's across the 20-meter band, and you just, when you set up, you just click the PTT each time, and it gives you a little graph on for each of the segments there. So that might be useful, I think, if you've got a high Q antenna. Otherwise, I think it's probably a bit of a gimmick. I don't know. It's something, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. The other thing, another thing as well is it's got a radio teletype decoder. Now, I think those people who know digital modes know that RTTY used to be the most popular digital mode. It was quite ubiquitous. It's sort of died a bit in recent years, I think, because you've had PSK come along and you've had FT8. But it's it's useful, I guess. But I think the thing is, you're probably going to be using a PC to do the mode anyway, so I'm not sure if you really need it. What would have been better, I think, was to have a CW decoder. I mean, the other Craft K3's got it. I think the TS590's got it. The Kenwood rig, which is a bit sort of a pricier rig than this one. But that's something CW is something you don't need to use a PC with, and probably would have been better having that. But anyway. Or the other thing I think they could have done is actually have the setup, so the shift between the two. Really, it's got two pillars, two frequencies go either side, go side to side, and that gives you the code. the shift here on amateur is 170 hertz. Now, what you've got, and there's one in northern Germany on about 10 megs, which is a weather station, but the shift there is, I think, 450 hertz. Probably would have been better to set it up for that, and so you could receive the weather. But yeah, I don't know. Another thing, I think if and I don't think Neil's on tonight, but using the SD card is something I haven't used. You've got a little slot between just on the bottom left of the rig, just below the AF, the volume knob, and you can put a little SD card in there, and that can save things like your memory channels, your rig settings, and it can even record your audio. So that could be quite useful. I mean, the thing is, I mean, a problem I have had, I think, with the 7300 is that I've had to do what's called a partial reset a couple of times. I noticed on CW it wasn't zero beating, as you call it, on the actual frequency that I was dialing in. It was a little bit offset by a couple of 100 hertz, and that's happened twice. But when I did a partial reset, that cleared it all up. And you find that even with rigs like the FTDX 5000, if you, I know Tom probably want to talk about this after the contest up at the farm when he's had it plugged into a network computer and all that sort of stuff. He'll put it back to the factory default, and you're sort of doing that when you're doing a reset. But if you save the settings on the SD card before you do that, then you can just sort of reload it very easily. So that's something to, and you can do screen grabs as well off the monitor. I think something else that, and this is for Icom rigs generally, you can get rig control software, which I believe is quite good. Again, I haven't used it, but it's called RSBA1, and there's a second version which has come out for it. This is the first version I'm showed here on the right, but it allows you to control your transceiver by your PC. That could be on your desk or at a remote location, and also shows you the spectrum scope as well. So I'm not sure if anyone's had experience with that. I'd be interested if somebody want to comment on that. So just lastly, would I recommend it? Would I recommend this 7300? Depends who you are. I think for people new to amateur or new to HF, but are keen on it, and decide, this is what I want to do, I think the answer is yes. And similarly, I think if it's for a club, the answer is yes as well. The reason for that being it's easy to use, intuitive menus, much more so than say the FT857, which people would have as a first rig, or an FT897. Just because they're cheap doesn't mean they're simple or relatively cheap. The other thing, I mean, there's plenty of help available online. As I was saying before, lots of YouTube videos, email reflectors, all that sort of stuff. Lots of people talking about the rig, probably more so than any other type now. If you're doing portable, I think it's a little bit large if you want to do, say, certainly for backpacking, even for a car. And in that case, you'd probably use, if you're looking at Icoms, the IC 7000 or 7100, or even the new 705. If you're looking at Yaesu FT857 or something. But you'd probably choose those for backpacking or mobile. I mean, as relatively small as it is for a base station, it's still a base station, the 7300. But if you're traveling around, say, in a caravan or a Winnebago, or you're staying in a hotel or something, you know, you can just plonk it on the table and let it go. It doesn't take up that much space. The other thing as well, I mean, it could be a travel rig if you're going to do that, and you may sort of want to have an IC 7610 or something at home, but this could be what you take away with you. Similarly with contesting and DXing, you probably want something a bit better if you can afford it. There are better transceivers available. You are paying, of course. As I was saying before, you may not get the things like the good performance with strong adjacent signals, etc., which is sort of the holy grail of DXing and contesting. But you know, it's good enough. Maybe for a remote DXpedition, if you can't take a lot of heavy stuff with you, it'll suffice. And of course, the more expensive rigs will have a these days will have a almost certainly these days will have a second receiver, and that's something certainly contesters will want. But you know, if you want to compromise, you're traveling reasonably lightly, say to an iota island or something like that, it could be a way to go. And overall, I think it's a good value for money, and it's a good all-rounder. And that's it.
Couple of questions, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is the power supply. Is it a 13 point whatever power supply, or is it a 230 volt supply that's on that one?
No, you do have to have the power supply, because it only takes 12 volts. It's not a mains.
It's not. That makes it portable. In other words, you could put it in your car and run it off the car battery. Yeah,
that's right. I think it's made for that sort of market in mind. It's not a base station rig like somebody like the one that you've got. Yeah.
Second question, and that is on the display. What happens when you press the PTT? Does it actually shut the waterfall off? Actually, because I mean, it must isolate the SDR system from the transmit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. I mean, with CW anyway, I mean, it just blanks out the waterfall, but it puts your keying pattern on the screen instead.
So, no, I disagree. If you're using, say, FT8, when you go to transmit, you actually see your transmitted signal on the waterfall.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but it blocks what you're actually receiving, though, doesn't it? Yeah. That is quite good. I think. I mean, I haven't really used it much for audio for voice, or sending audio through it like it would with FT8 or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think actually, just a question for Pete. Do you use the audio, the fancy audio scope and whatever on it when you're doing FT8? Is that useful or
no?
Nah.
No, that's interesting. Another Pete here, because I was about to say yes, absolutely. If you use it on center rather than fixed, then you can see your transmit signal, and on receive you can see all the other individual FT8 signals, so you can see where you are with respect to them without messing around.
Yeah. Although you'd see that on your PC though, wouldn't you? Anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's just I just prefer to have it on the screen, and I'll tell you where it does come in. Not on this rig, but on its big brother, the 9700, or its UHF brother. If you're using it in satellite mode, of course, it works in full duplex, and the display stays on all the time, so you can see what's going on and who's coming over the top of you.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of confusion there. When you said audio scope, there is a mode on the 7300 where you can actually see an oscilloscope trace of the audio, and I've never found a use for that.
It looked a bit gimmicky to me. I mean, I saw demos and I thought, well, what are you telling me? I mean, it looks good, but you know, yeah.
You can measure frequency with it in theory.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine there is use for it. It's certainly used to promote it. It looks like a good function. It's very colourful and that. But I remember, I mean, I quoted the Amateur Logic show with Ray Novak on it, and they showed, if I remember it, because it's been a while, they showed that function, but didn't really show what the advantage of it was. But
yeah. One thing that you can use it for, which is really quite useful, is if you're using the spectrum scope and the waterfall to show the whole band, then you can use the audio scope to show your passband, which is if it's full of CW signals or FT8 or whatever, you can look at the whole band and your passband simultaneously.
Yeah, that actually that's a good point. Yeah.